Now, one of the hardest places to pick for the All Blacks squad that gets announced next week for Dave Rennie and his team is likely to be the loose forwards, because there are a tremendous amount of high-quality loose forwards putting up big numbers this year. So what we've done is we've had a really good look at the stats that are coming through for all of the contenders, and that's the attack stats. We're talking about per 80 minutes. The carries, the meters, the dominance, the defenders beaten, the clean breaks, the defense stats like your tackles, your dominant tackles, your offloads allowed, then your breakdown stats, your turnovers ones, your ruck arrivals, your ruck wins, all of these things. And we've chucked them into the old supercomputer and we've looked to figure out exactly who should be in this team. Now, Jipper, let's start with how many loose forwards would you take in a 34-man squad?
Well, I named my 34 a few weeks ago. Don't judge me. I am obsessed with this beautiful game. And I had 5 purely because I couldn't whittle the locks down while Scott Barrett was available. But since Scott Barrett's sort of not available, I think they'll go with 4 locks because Tupavai will have to do the bulk of the work there. So I think there's going to be 6 loose forwards picked. And what we've done here, we've weighted our little selection index with 5 different, I suppose, criteria. And the first, which has the heaviest weighting, and we tried to do it off Dave Rennie's comments around how he's going to select this team. So 35% of the weighting goes to Super Rugby impact. So where do they rank in terms of, I suppose, per minute engagement? Almost like a hard working index from Super Rugby stats. We've then got 25% of how many repeat efforts did they have within Super Rugby. So from there, you've got 60% of this is weighted to that back in game stat that Dave Rennie likes, and he said he's going to pick on form. So that's 60% of the weighting. But I think then you have to put 20% of the weighting to like a point of difference. So like you can't have all the same player. You need players that have the ability to do different things, so they're a perfect loose forward mix. And the way we've sort of done that is we try to utilize the stats where they weight favorably to work out what their point of difference is and how it fits into a mix of 6. Then we've got 10% going towards Super Rugby experience, because Test match footy is going to be a lift up. So you've got to have a few runs under your belt, and then 10% is not Super Rugby experience. 10% towards Test match experience. So having the ability, I think you need to acknowledge that going into that Test arena, you've got to have guys that have been there and done it. First and foremost, but there may be space for someone who hasn't entered that but has Super Rugby experience, finals experience, coming out of the last 2 weeks of Super Rugby and who's performed, and then just that role balance within the squad. And by role balance, what's difference between your point of difference and your role balance is understanding how Dave Rennie and his coaching team want to defend and attack and how they fit in terms of their role. And there's that 100%. And then, we've cracked some. We were full nerd mode. You and I in particular this morning. Bryn was still sleeping, but these 2 geeks were just absolutely frothing.
It's worth saying, obviously, that Ardie Savea doesn't, feature within the Super Rugby, but is an automatic selection. So what we're looking at is the 5 people who aren't Ardie Savea who are going to make this 6.
The Opta stats we put in, though, were for Super Rugby last year. I know the Super Rugby Player of the Year, and it might be a bit unfair, but that's the only way. We couldn't use the Japanese League stats.
Yeah.
I think it was the best way to go like for like.
Right, and then the other thing is that we've heard that Lester Whainga-Nuku is not going to be a loose forward. He might be a hybrid loose forward, but he's not going to be a loose forward within Dave Rennie's team. So he's kind of been eliminated from this conversation due to that. Yeah,
and I tried to include him, but it got too confusing as to where he was when he did this stuff. He covered so many positions, so to get specific to a loose forward, it was very, very challenging to get a fair reflection. But he's definitely a hybrid player. But I don't think he'd ever fill a loose forward role in a squad. What we've got is Ardie Savea at 1, 94 out of 100. You've got Wallace Sititi, who's there. You've seen the impact he's made for the Chiefs, even though he's been injured most of the year. He's sitting at 90, but then Peter Lakai at 88 just shows you the out and out. Doesn't get the highlights. He probably doesn't get the big raps, but man, the amount of work he gets through, he just fits this Dave Dave Rennie mould, to the point that those first three names you almost feel are locked in.
Yeah.
Your Ardie, your Wallace, depending on his health, and then Pete Lakai. And then we've got a couple of smokies in 4 and 5. And I think it shows, and it's really changed my thinking. But Ethan Blackadder comes in at 4, at 86 out of 100. And his biggest rating is his repeat efforts. He's 92 out of 100, which is the highest out of anyone. So back-to-back efforts, back in game. His Super Rugby impact is high. It's not as high as a Lakai, but it's still high enough. And that's probably more to do with he hasn't been able to play. So does he come into the selection fold? You know, like, and I think we should talk about it, Brenna. Like, he's someone that people have sort of probably forgot about and cast aside because his body hasn't been able to sort of allow him to stay available and take his opportunities in the black jersey. But statistically, he still rates extremely high, but most importantly, the highest, and the one stat Dave Rennie is obsessed with is back-to-back efforts.
A trait that Ethan definitely has. So look, you know, when I was seeing those stats like 92 is something that I'm not surprised hearing that, because the work rate that he does on both sides of the ball is a big trait of his. So Ethan's probably just gone under the radar. I think the biggest thing with Ethan, Jipper, that we have touched on previously with him, it's his body. Is he able to get through a full calendar when it comes to the All Blacks? Now, I think we have touched on, you think Ardie, Wallace and Peter. Well, I'll probably say pretty good bet that those could be the three guys, depending on Wallace Sititi's injury, that you'd think that'll be the 6, 7, 8. But when you're looking at their number 20 role and the utility with the forwards, and Ethan Blackadder has to be in the mould based on those metrics, especially the work rate. That's something that Dave Rennie has been massive on when it comes to the bigger stats.
The other thing with Ethan Blackadder is, and you can understand why his body fails on him, because his dominant tackles and his dominant carry stats are off the charts. And if you're going to South Africa and you're going to be physical, he is the guy above all else in Super Rugby in New Zealand who brings that.
But it's also whack. And then it's these repeat efforts and it's whack again. And then it's whack again. It's like the Crusaders run came with him coming back. And I think the fixation with Leicester really took, I suppose, the focus off him and the under appreciation of what he achieved. Like when we started this morning, I expected him to be in sort of the top 10, but I did not expect him to be that high that he's pushing for a top 3 spot.
The other person who obviously within that 6 looks really good across all the indexes, Brenner, is Anton Segner. Now, we've interviewed him, we've talked about him a lot, but it's pretty clear based on the stats that he is very much in the running to be one of the 6 loose forwards, if that's how many they pick.
If I go between the two of them, it's like Duplessis, Creefy and Anton Segner. Those are the 2 guys that I am rating. And looking at their stacks, you know, they're 6 and 7. They're very, very similar in all the kind of areas. Like you're looking around, there's only maybe 1 or 2 points that are between them. But I think the Opta, the 35% was at Anton Segner was at 91 and Duplessis Creefy was at 83. So like very, very small margins with those two. Like I think both of them are somewhat similar. I think if you do look at the Jackal turnovers, I think Segner is leading the comp. So he's an out-and-out Jackler, which is a very good trait to have. I think he's had more carries and clean breaks, but he's played a lot more minutes than Duplessis Creefy over the year. But and his improvements over the gain line, I think Anton Segner this year, like I think Duplessis Creefy, very good in and around getting over the advantage line, and he's shown that in a few campaigns. But I think Anton Segner, Jip, in that area has been a massive improvement in his game when it comes to the attacking side of the ball.
Yeah, Anton Segner, if it wasn't for Test match experience, would be second. That's the area that brings it down. And remember, Test match experience is only a small portion of this. He's 91 out of 100 on form. Only person ahead is Peter Lakai on 93. And then his repeat efforts, he's 84. And the only person ahead of him is Blackadder, Ardie, Savea, and Peter Lakai. Oh, and Duplessis Creefy. So he's ready.
Yeah.
You have to think he's ready. And when he came in here to be interviewed, man, like you don't understand how big he is. It's sort of like when you meet Geordie Barrett.
Yeah.
You sort of like see them on TV and then you're like, also when I met Geordie Barrett, I was warming up opposite him and I was like, geez, that's a big kid. I was like, that is a big unit. Go low on him, James.
Someone that I was quite surprised in these stats was Christian Leo Willie. at 5. Like if you look at 89, there's only, like you said, there's Peter Lakai 93 and Ardie Savea that's only higher than him, and Anton Signa. So in that top 6 role. But I think, if I do look at Christian Leo, well, he's been an out and out 8. Do you know what I mean? So he hasn't covered 6 or 7. I think a lot of these other players are able to cover multiple positions. So is that something that's going to hamper his selection? But if you're looking at the stats, I'm very surprised. Not surprised, sorry. It was just no, I was surprised actually. Yeah, seeing him at 5th, considering the Lucy's that have been here this year.
His work rate, particularly with ball in hand, has been huge, hasn't it?
Massive, and his ability to offload. Like he's created a lot of that broken play opportunity for the Crusade. I just think of that recency bias, but that offload to McNichol. Admittedly, I loved how McNichol saw the space and injected in, but to have the ability to hear that and free his arm, he's an effort player. Like he puts everything into it. The only question, I suppose, around him is in South Africa is the ability to win back-to-back collisions. And I think there's a clear 5 in my head, but there's 3 or 4 that could easily slip into that 6th spot. And remembering, I think a lot of these guys will still go to South Africa. Like quite a lot on the list. Most of this list in the top 11 will be on that plane with the 44-man squad.
So, Bryn, were you surprised by much of this when you look at the 6th form guys?
I think what I was a little bit surprised, like we talked around probably Ethan Blackadder and Christian Leo, Willie, but probably just Luke Jacobson and where he placed in and around these. That was one thing that that did surprise me, like because I think we talk around him a lot around his effort areas and being able to win collisions, and he still does that. But I think if you do look a little bit deeper and go into the stats, I was very surprised that he wasn't inside the top 5 or top 6 in the top loose forwards in the competition.
And if you look at it, remember a lot of this is per minute. Wallace hasn't played as much. They have rotated their loosies a hell of a lot, but they almost steal because there's a lot of Chiefs in there. You've got Parker in there, you've got Fino in there, you've got Jacobson, and you've got Sititi. They steal points from each other. Yeah. So this is why, the way we're doing this is a test selection index, but then we're going to probably predict our 6 that isn't going to be the top 6 of this as such, because there has to be a gut feel. You have to, have a sense of who can play well. I was blown away with how low he was. Because for me, even looking at it on the weekend, he doesn't, on this index, he's sitting at 81 out of 100. That doesn't feel right for me.
And the other thing about him is similar to the Blackadder conversation, is when you go to South Africa, a guy who Jerome Kano says is one of the hardest guys to hit him ever 100%. Has got to be considered based on that element of physicality alone.
Yeah. I think stats probably tell 80%
yep.
of the story. A lot of people say 50%, but I don't think it is. I think they give you a real good feel if someone's putting in the work, and then there's just got to be a 20% based on what's under your left tip.
Yeah.
And have you got the ticker to keep fronting up and get the job done?
So, with all of that said, let's get loose forward 6 from both of you.
Go, Brunner.
No, you can't go first. I'm still...
Go, because you're going to change.
I'll go.
You go first.
Right. Okay. Other than the 3, Ardie, Wallace, and Pete, I'm going Duplessis, Blackadder, and Signa.
Right, you've gone Duplessis because he's the only out-and-out 7, possibly out of all of them, like a classical number 7.
I think that's always been traditional when it comes to us. Like we've always had probably 2 in the squad. So I think if an Ardie did get injured, look, I know Signa's been playing for the Blues at 7, but probably hasn't played a lot when it comes to as much as Duplessis played at 7. So I've got Dupes in there in the way that he's played. So, but then I've also got Sigel. Yeah, so someone is going to miss out, and I think that's probably the best thing about these stats, and even us when we're talking about it, someone's going to miss out. I think Blackadder, if you're talking around the stats, and they're really big around the bigger stats and the Opta stats, and Dave Rennie does pick on that, then you'd have to think a Blackadder would be in the squad based on that. Now, the only thing around that is, can he stay on the field for a full campaign, and does that come into the selection criteria? If that's the case, then I'd go Jacobson, who's been proven at that level.
I named my 34 a few weeks ago, and I only had the 5 loosies having Tupou Vaught covering 6. So I'm still comfortable with the 5 that I chose. So I'd be going Ardie, Wallace if fit, Peter Lakai, Duplessis, Karifi, and Luke Jacobson. And then my 6, I had Blackadder, Segner, Parker, and Leo Willie bracketed, and someone else there, but I can't remember who it was. But it's Segner. And it looks like Bryn and I are going the classic Crusader Blues. But if you look at the 2 areas of what Dave Rennie's spoken about, pick on form and repeated effort, Segner is out and out second best behind Peter Lakai.
I've kind of started mine with the loose forward trio / bench. Savea, Lakai and Sititi starting based on what we've seen, I suppose, from Lakai and Sititi and also what we know of Savea. Then on the bench, that's the hard one, is who do you put in there? And based off the impact that we've seen from Blackadder, the way that he throws himself into it, I put Blackadder on my bench, and there's a really good chance that you'd also find Nuku there to cover as well. So then who do you add to those 2 and how do you get cover?
See, look at that, mate, the old index. Look at it. It says your ideal starting trio.
Yeah.
Off the back of the index is Sititi at 6, Savea at 7, Lakai at 8, and Blackadder and Jersey 20.
But then who do you put with them? Do you have cover for 6, 7, 8 who need to step in at the last minute across both positions? So for me, I was like, well, Segner needs to be there because he's also a great line-out option. And I wonder, when I look at all of them,
that's true.
There probably aren't as many great line-out forwards. He'd be the best of the line-out forwards, especially at the front of the line-out for the Blues this year.
You're going to drop my boy, aren't you? You're going to drop Duplessis.
I don't know.
I am. Yeah, he's like, I am.
I feel like what you could do is you can have Duplessis as one of the non-34 and bring him in when you need him as cover straight in. But Segner has been playing great at 7 too.
We're sticking to the 6. That was the question.
He's gassing my boy Duke. He's gassing him.
Ross, you're 6. You're 6.
My 6 is Savea, Sititi, Lakai, Blackadder, Jacobson, Segner.
Okay, Duplessis misses out.
But knowing that if a specialist 7 goes down, you can almost pull Duplessis straight into the team. And we know in domestic tests, they carry extra people around the place anyway. I just wonder whether we need a person as bench cover who's a specialist 7. And so maybe we're better off to have other people who can come in at the last minute to cover the bench, and Duplessis comes in almost a cover start from outside of the squad.
Can I ask you, before this was presented, was Blackadder in your 6?
He absolutely was not.
No.
No.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've really dropped the ball. I feel like I've really dropped the ball. Like our role is to provide the statistical element and understanding. I was horrified with myself when I was going through this myself. Still didn't get in my 6. Sorry, Ethan. I think you're a fantastic player. But it just shows your work has been undervalued and underappreciated, my mate.
But will it?
No longer.
Yeah.
You're in the 6.
Then these are my 6. The other thing is, who is Dave Rennie's 6 going to be? That's the last question, isn't it? Like, we picked ours, but who, based on what you know of Dave Rennie and based on what you've seen across these stats, will fit the Rennie profile?
Segner and Blackadder are the ones that stick out as fitting his profile the most. Lakai's a given. I think he was going to be in everyone's. Wallace too is everyone, but those are the 2 that are glaringly obvious that fit his mould.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it'll be his appetite for risk with injuries.
Yeah.
So you've got to have Jacobson there. I don't know. I just don't understand how he's so low. But anyway, I'm going to move on from that.
Yeah. Either way, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Parker's come along really well the last few weeks too. Like the amount of work he's getting through. Again, he's sort of been in and out with injury and stuff. But his last few weeks, when it's mattered, he showed again why he's a test player.
Yeah.
I feel like in these Super Rugby finals, he's been really strong. And Finau, he's another one. Like that Chiefs loose forward trio, like we have been fixated really on the Hurricanes for a long time around their trio and their depth, which is still there. But man, at the pointy end of the season, some of these big dogs have stepped up for the Chiefs.
And I think lastly, just probably one name as well. If you do talk around their number 20 role and bring in some impact, like Brandon Yosei, like what he can do off the bench with ball in hand as well. Like I know he probably, you know, they've chopped and changed a little bit at the Hurricanes with the depth of the loose forward trio, but you know, you're talking around benches role because we probably know who the 6, 7, 8 is going to be. He's something different when you come into a power athlete and something that you can be able to do something out of nothing. He's definitely one guy as well for the Hurricanes.
It's hard, man. I don't know how they do it.
It
hard.
literally
There's so many good
turned
contenders.
my little selection world upside down putting this together.
Yeah, and I mean, Christian Leo Willie to miss out as well, given what he's done all
100%.
year, is hard on him. There's actually an incredible stock of loose forwards.
Well, and I think most of those names that we're saying it's hard to leave out, like even for you, like Karifi will go to South Africa, Leo Willie and Blackadder will go in my one, and so on and so forth for Brynner's one.
Yeah, and then you've got, you know, Lucas Casey for the future. You know, I think for the Highlanders, TK Howden's work rate, his tackle numbers, those kind of things were off the charts. There were some other players further down who also did pretty well this year.
Like for Super Rugby, if we just go through, I think it's worth noting, you got Lakai 93, Signa 91, Leo Willie 89, Blackadder 85, Karifi 83, Sititi 82, Jacobson 78, TK Howden 75, Simon Parker 70, and then Samu Penifino at 68.
Yeah. There's a few around. We'll wait and see for next Monday. And of course, we will be absolutely covering everything out of that. We will have a coach on the show and we'll be talking exactly who has made it, why and how, and hopefully have a few players on next week as well. So plenty to come in the Aotearoa Rugby Pod throughout the week. Of course, you can get the Aotearoa Rugby Pod across at Aotearoa Rugby Pod official channels. You can also go to stuff.co.nz into Rugby Pass as well. Plenty of places to get us, and we really look forward to what's happening next week with this All Black selection post the final.